Again, one more time.
Okay, go.
Okay. The central nervous system is made by the brain and the spinal cord going down. The brain has four lobes. They are the same like those at the bones of the skull. So we have the frontal lobe, we have two parietal lobes, on the most back we have occipital lobes, and back to the ear we have the temporal lobes. Those yellow things. The brain, if you look to the brain, it has raised areas called gyri or gyrus, and it has shallow depressions called sulcus or sulci. Okay? If you look to the brain surface, if we have a deep depression, we're going to name it as a fissure like this one, like this. So if it is going deep, we name it as fissure. We have an exception to that, which is the central sulcus. What is the central sulcus? It runs in the parietal lobe like this. It has areas anterior to it called pre-central gyrus, area back to it post-central gyrus. The gyrus anterior to it is mainly for motor functions, so that's the primary motor area. The one back to it is for sensory functions, and this is the primary sensory area. We have an area for motor speech called Broca's area. It's this area for motor speech. We have an area for hearing in the temporal lobe. We have an area for vision in the occipital lobe. This is the cerebellum and the most posterior parts of the brain. If we open the brain into two halves, each half is called cerebral hemisphere. If we open it, this is one half. It shows this white fibrous band called corpus callosum. What's the corpus callosum? It's a fibrous band connecting the two halves of the brain. Connecting the two halves of the brain. The brain shows cavities. A cavity in the brain is called the ventricle. How many those we do have? We have two lateral ventricles, one on each side, and we have a third ventricle, and we have the fourth ventricle. Inside these ventricles, we have a fluid called CSF or cerebrospinal fluid circulating from each to the following ventricle like this way. We have what's called diencephalon or the core of the brain. The diencephalon is made by the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. The thalamus is surrounded by the third ventricle, like this. And then we have the brain stem. The brain stem starts with the midbrain, the upper piece. This bulging area is the pons. The lowest piece is the medulla oblongata. Next to the medulla oblongata, we have the spinal cord running this way. If we study the spinal cord, if we have a cross section in the spinal cord, it shows an area by the middle, which is this blue area. This is called gray matter. Why gray matter? It looks dark in color because neurons are not covered with a myelin sheath. And a white area all around it, this is called white matter because all nerves in this white matter are covered with a myelin sheath. Areas in the spinal cord. If I'm doing a cross section like that from anterior to posterior. So here is the anterior horn. Here are the posterior horns. Again, these blue things, those are the anterior horns. These are the posterior horns. These are the lateral horns. Anterior can be named also ventral. Posterior can be named also as dorsal. Sensory neurons, before they enter into posterior horns, they have to stop in this ganglion, this rounded area called the ganglion, which is this bulging area. So if this is a sensory or afferent, it should have a stop here where the ganglion is located. Once it leaves the spinal cord, it's going to be named motor or efferent. So here we have a purely sensory nerve. Here is a purely motor nerve. Here is a mixed nerve containing both motor and sensory. This is for the spinal cord. If you look to this mannequin, the peripheral nervous system. Can you come this? If you're looking for the peripheral nervous system, this is a mannequin showing the peripheral nervous system. We have it, the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. Somatic nervous system is going to be made by 12 cranial nerves coming from the brain. And the spinal nerves are going to be 31 pairs coming out from the spinal cord on each side of the spinal cord. Autonomic nervous system is made by sympathetic and the parasympathetic. These are the ganglia for the sympathetic nearby the spinal cord. So this is named sympathetic chain, one on each side of the spinal cord, and they have to stop in these ganglia like this way. These all are branches of the spinal nerves making plexuses. We have one plexus in the neck called the cervical plexus, one plexus in the armpit called axillary plexus, and then we have another plexus at the lumbar region, another plexus at the sacral region. This is all what you need. Okay, what about the special senses?